Welcome to the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. I'm thrilled you're here. My name is Jason Elkins, and in addition to being your host, I'm also a former U.S. Army paratrooper, third-generation commercial hot air balloon pilot, paramotor pilot, ex-Montana fly fishing guide, advanced open water scuba diver, and a full-time nomad that's visited more than 30 countries on 6 continents. As a seasoned adventure travel expert with a passion for creating and sharing meaningful experiences, I'm on a quest to impact the lives of adventure travelers, the tour operators they rely on, and the communities that host them. Every week, I bring you exclusive interviews with fascinating adventure tourism experts who have agreed to share their personal stories, favorite destinations, and some invaluable travel insights they've picked up along the way. We'll enjoy a casual conversation, create some connections, and likely share some laughs. It's my hope that by the end of each episode, this big world will feel just a bit smaller. Let's get started, shall we? Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. So happy to have each and every one of you back here today, and I'm also super excited. We've got a wonderful guest today. We've got Hayley Donigan. Hayley is a brand voice strategist and copywriter for travel brands. Hayley, welcome to the show. So happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
This is going to be a lot of fun. We spoke a week or two ago, and I thought your perspective and just kind of your energy was amazing, and I thought, hey, we need to come back. So here we are, and right before I pushed the button, we talked about you're a brand voice strategist, and sometimes people that work in the branding world are really sensitive to their brand and what it is. And when I asked you about your title, you're like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
I love that. So thank you so much for your openness. Hayley, we're going to get into your background, childhood traumas, all kinds of stuff that caused you to get from wherever you were to where you are now. But before we do that, I want to give our listeners an opportunity to kind of connect with what it is you do before we start talking about why. So what does a brand voice strategist and copywriter for travel brands do?
Well, it's funny because I feel like I change how I write about what I do all the time. And it's that cliche of when you're a copywriter, you struggle to write for yourself. It's really easy to do it for other people and other brands, but for yourself, it's really difficult. And I can really sympathize with the companies that I work for, especially ones that have founders who are really close to what they're doing, because it just feels so personal and difficult to articulate what you do. I tend to actually just call myself a copywriter, but then I think I'm selling myself short, because a lot of what I do is really getting underneath the surface of a brand and figuring out how to position them in the marketplace against their competitors and understanding what their audience is, how to connect with their audiences in an emotional way. And so a lot of strategy goes into it. And so that is why I added the brand voice strategist. And also because brand voice is something that I really, really love doing. It's really fun to bring the character of a brand to life. So that's why I've put that first, because that's what I love doing the most.
You know, it's fascinating you say that. I spoke with someone recently that, as I recall, I was told your brand is what people say about you when you're not there. I don't. There's probably different ways to say that. And when I heard you say, sometimes it's hard to write copy for myself, or you're sympathetic with business owners and founders that, somebody on their team says, you should write more, you should put yourself out there more, you should do more blog posts. And it's hard. And so where I'm going with this is it sounds like, okay, for you to come in and look at somebody's brand and dig deep with them and kind of get into it, you've got that benefit of not being so emotionally tied to it. And you can probably look at a brand and say, look, here's my take on what I see on your website or what I see, and help me. This is the story I've created in my head about your brand. How does that align with how you feel about your brand? Yes. And then you see those gaps and they're like, no, that's not what we're doing. Okay, well, yes. Let's figure out how to share that. And it's really, really hard to do that when you're sitting inside your business. It's the same thing with the podcast, when guests come on the show. Every guest I've had on the show has had somebody on their team said, you need to put yourself out there more. You should take your cell phone when you're walking around on a trip and take videos and commentaries and post them on social media. And how terrifying is that?
Yeah. But you nailed it, because I feel like when I approach a project, I always think in terms of, I'm the customer now. So I'm getting under the skin of who is the customer and how can I resonate with them. And so I am actually kind of detached from the brand in that sense, because what a lot of brands tend to do is they have certain things that they want to tell the customer. And very often they lead with, this is what we do, this is who we are, these are the things that we want you to know. But the customer often doesn't actually care about those things, or maybe that's secondary. So really what you're trying to do is, what is the emotional benefit that's going to resonate, and how do you articulate that? And that is really what makes a copywriter special versus anyone can write about a business, but that is what a copywriter brings to the table.
Yeah, it's so true. And it aligns with, I've been working on a project to build out search capabilities, for example, on the podcast website, so people can come in and search for different, I don't want to say episodes, but for different guests, different experts, and connect with them. And I'm super excited about it. And I spend hours and hours and hours in doing it. And I recognize that I have no idea if anybody else cares.
Yeah.
So I can say, well, if you ask me, well, what is special about your website? I can say, oh, well, I've got this AI assisted search feature where people can go in and connect with all these guests. And you could say, okay, Jason, I would never use that. I don't know if that's important. Like, I just, but yeah, so it's always nice to have a second set of eyeballs, ears. Yeah. So, okay.
But you know what? I would also venture to guess that you probably, you speak to so many people. You are actually the expert in your brand in that sense. And so probably instinctually, you do know that product is something that resonates with them, but it is, how do you articulate that to them, right? So it's like you have the knowledge of that audience, but then how do you communicate to them that this is a feature that they should care about?
You're absolutely right, because I love building features, but communicating why that's important and how that's useful. I find that when I get on a call with somebody, or I'm having a conversation with somebody, I can explain it to them, but you need to get them on the call before you can explain it to them.
Exactly. And can you do it in 3 words? That's what makes it really hard. Yeah.
That's a big challenge, because I've spent a lot of time on websites and, in this travel space. And I'm guilty of it myself, is I know what I want to convey, but it takes me 14 paragraphs to do it.
Yeah, I know.
Nobody reads 14
and you have to
paragraphs.
Synthesize it down. But I always think, people just, this is the mindset I take actually. The more time I spend making something really well crafted, it takes a lot of thought, but that means less time that the reader has to spend in figuring out what you're trying to say. So it's almost like a common decency thing of, I want someone to have a really good experience when they land on my website, which means that they get the point of what I'm trying to convey. They get the information that they want immediately, and even better, they feel something and they feel excited or inspired. And so that takes a lot of time, and people don't realize that. But if you just spend 10 minutes quickly writing something and getting whatever you want to get across, that's fine. They might be able to figure it out, but they might get bored of trying to figure it out, and they might just leave and go onto someone else's website.
I love it, because you just hit it on the head. I'm doing something like a AI assisted search engine, whatever. And it's like, okay, here are the 10 things that I think is cool about this. And I want to cover all 10 things. That's why I end up with maybe 10 paragraphs. And someone else is like, okay, but these 2 or 3 things are cool enough. You don't need all these other things. They're cool to you, but they're cool to you because you figured out how to do it, and you're excited that you figured out how to do it. But nobody cares that you figured out how to do it. It either works for them, it helps them hit their goal, or not. So
yeah. And it really does always come down to understanding the audience and what they're looking for. Because, for example, a highly technical audience might be looking for that level of detail. You can also try to follow the pyramid principle, which is that basically you always put the most important information at the top, and then you go into more detail as you go along. But there's all sorts of different formulas you can follow. So I use instinct.
Because that's tough for somebody that thinks it's all important, because I spent hours doing it. So, and the reason I'm saying this is not about Jason's website. This is about anybody that's listening that has a business. And we've got a lot of tour operators that are listening to this right now. And it's like figuring out what is the most important part. I spend a lot of time on websites, as I mentioned, and it's interesting because sometimes people reach out to me, they want to maybe come on the show, and I go look at their website. And the first thing I'm trying to figure out is, honestly, it's just, what do they do? Like,
Yes.
like I go to their website and I've got to dig around 3 pages before I start to kind of figure out what it is they're doing. And even then, sometimes we get on an intro call and I'm still not sure. And I'm like, can you, in your own words, please tell me what it is you're doing? And then they will tell me what they do. And I'm like,
Right.
wow, I wish you would have put that on your website, like right on the hero. Like,
Just be clear. Yeah, first and foremost. And that's the thing too, is like, I think the first priority is to be clear, and then you can get a little bit fancier and more clever. But if you're being clever and you're foregoing being clear, there's no point in doing that. So yeah, it's very interesting to see. I live in London, so to see the tube advertisements, I like to kind of be a critic and go in and think, ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
That slapped me in the face. Ooh, that's not so good. I wonder who wrote that.
Mm-hmm.
You see a lot of AI generated ones as well, which is very interesting.
Well, that's a whole nother conversation. Maybe we'll touch on it. We might come back to that. Yeah, it's, do you find, like, because another thing have seen is, like, some people, either they are very visual or their marketing team, somebody in their space that advised them on their website, built their website, really likes graphic design, really likes colors and maybe even fonts and all that stuff. And you can look at the website, wow, this is a really nice website, but I don't know what they do.
Oh yeah.
And then you've got other websites that probably have pretty decent copy, or you can kind of see what they do, but they have no aesthetic appreciation.
Right. I know. And this is why the world of digital marketing is so broad, as you know. It's like there's so many elements that come into it to make that balance.
Okay. I wanted to ask you this because I also heard you say sometimes when you sit down to write for yourself, it's harder than writing for someone else. I completely get that. It's also much easier for me to have conversations with guests about their story, what's important to them.
Yeah, if I start to ask you.
Yeah. Where if somebody said, okay, Jason, you're going to sit down and share your story and what's important to you for the next hour, I'd probably have to write a script and practice it and all this stuff. And it's just so much easier to pull other people's stories out. But where I'm going with that, as a copywriter or as a brand voice strategist,
Mm-hmm.
do you ever think that maybe you want to partner with another copywriter, just like to either have them edit your stuff or write your stuff? Like, do you ever feel like, this would just be easier if I just hired a copywriter to help me, even though you're a copywriter? Or does ego get in the way, or does that happen?
That has genuinely never crossed my mind, and that's such a good idea. That is such a brilliant idea. Just to see what they would say, like how would they look at it? Because obviously you can take things in many different angles. I would hope that another copywriter would look at my work and say, yeah, you nailed it. Only have tiny little notes here and there, but it's all subjective. But yeah, it's a great idea. I should do that.
It makes sense because I don't know a lot about publishing and editing and writing, but my understanding is most of the amazing writers out there have great editors.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
and we're all perfectionists, by the way. Like I don't think I've ever written anything ever where I'm like, okay, that is done now. I'm never going to improve that or look at that again. If I read something that I wrote 5 years ago, I can guarantee I'll have a million things that I want to change about it. But that's just the nature of the game.
That's interesting. I bet I don't bet, but I'm postulating that if I had you and another copywriter and I presented the challenge of okay, Hayley, I want you, so-and-so is going to write the copy. They're going to interview you about what's important. They're going to have a conversation with you, and then they're going to walk away and write the copy. And then you're going to walk away and write the copy. I'm guessing you'd spend 8 hours in a lot of anguish. They'd come back in about an hour. And you would read your final product and still feel like it's not quite right. But maybe you'd read theirs and think, wow, she nailed it or he nailed it, right? Yeah.
So true. And I think the thing as well is it's, there's a skill set with copywriting where you can follow certain principles and, you got to do your audience research and your competitor research and there's different formulas that you can follow, et cetera, et cetera. But there is also a craft to it in the sense, there's a lot of creativity as well and personality that goes into it. And so that, I can find that really difficult actually because it's quite personal what you think. Okay, I think that this creative element is great. and I can back that up. I can explain why and how that would resonate with the target audience. But at the end of the day, it is my creative juices that have created that. And so it's scary when you put that out into the world, or, you know, a client has to sign that off, or another copywriter looks at it and they might say, "Ooh, what have you done there?" Or, and I don't know. I don't know if I'm the only one, but I get very personally attached to the things that I write. Going back to what we were saying about writing for yourself and why that's so difficult.
Yeah. All right. Let's figure out what's behind all that. Let's go back to your childhood.
Okay.
Here's what I want to figure out is I want our listeners, and I also, of course, want to hear is how did you get from where you were to where you are now? You know, nobody just wakes up one day and they're doing, you know, this type of work in the travel space unless something came along the way. So I don't know. Should we start with the angle on the writing side or the fascination with travel? I don't know. Let's just go back to when you were 12. What did you want to be when you were 12? If I had a time machine, I went back and I said, "Hayley, what do you want to be when you grow up?"
You know, I don't know. I think I had a lot of different things growing up. I think I probably would have said pastry chef at some point, artist, you know, postman. I think I had like, I was interested in everything. I don't think teacher, maybe I would have said. I used to, so a big part of my personality is I love guinea pigs. And I used to teach my guinea pigs when I was little. So I would have them sit on the bed and I'd have my little whiteboard and there would be a whole, you know, this is the agenda for today and this is your lunch break and et cetera, et cetera. So actually, I think I would have probably said teacher, guinea pig teacher.
Were you an only child?
No.
No? Okay.
But my whole family does like guinea pigs. So we're a little weird.
Because I'm just imagining.
That's the first on your show, Jason.
I'm imagining poor little Hayley, no siblings, and sitting in her room with her guinea pigs trying to teach them Spanish or something, or math.
Well, you know, I'm an introvert and I was a very independent child. Like, I've never had any problem spending time in my own company. So maybe that's why I give it only child vibe.
All right. That's very cool. Are you familiar with the Myers-Briggs personality assessment?
Yes. And I think I've done it, but I can't remember what my...
I won't put you on the spot. I was just curious.
But I know I'm definitely introverted. I like my own company a lot, but I'm very friendly. So maybe I'm an ambivert. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Okay, so where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Orange County, California.
What was that like, growing up in Orange County, California?
It was pretty idyllic. It's always sunny. The seasons don't really change much, but it's an interesting place to grow up in the sense that you don't know what you don't know. So I didn't really understand that was unusual to live somewhere that was always sunny. That was just, you know, Christmas, it's sunny, you know, that was normal to me. We, you know, grew up going in the pool, going to the beach, being outside, going to the park. So I'm really lucky. And Orange County is very suburban, and so it's a very safe place to live, and I feel like I got a lot of opportunities to be a kid. You know, like, I think kids that grow up in big cities maybe have to grow up a little bit quicker, but I felt like I really got to be a kid, so I feel really grateful for that.
Okay, and because, I'm happy that you mentioned that, because a lot of our listeners are from around the world, and some of us have ideas of California, so even I'm familiar with California, but when you say Orange County, California, I think a lot of people are like, oh, that's like LA, right? That's like, yeah, that's hustle bustle, kind of crazy. But it sounds like it was more of a suburb type of childhood, I guess.
Yes, it's really interesting what people's perceptions are of Orange County, especially because it's been on TV, so people are familiar with the OC. And I come from a city called Rancho Santa Margarita, which a lot of people have not heard of. And the reason probably is because it's only 25 years old. It just celebrated its 25th birthday. So that's something maybe we can talk about during our conversation, because I'm sure that's part of the reason that I'm so fascinated with traveling, because I go places that have all this history and culture and heritage, and my city was literally built 25 years ago. It's beautiful, but it's like living in Disneyland or something. It's very manicured.
Okay. All right. No old buildings, no. Okay.
None of that. No. Well, if by 90s you mean old, because people do now think that that's kind of vintage. So yeah, kind of.
Well, that's true. And for our listeners, where do you live now?
I live in London, England now.
Yeah,
Yeah, very different.
that's a change.
Yeah,
Like,
it's a big
sure,
change.
in so many ways, because I heard you say that you grew up kind of thinking it was sunny everywhere every day, and
Oh yeah, and
and
this is we were talking about this before the call. It'll be sunny here 1 minute, then it's pouring with rain. And so we were talking about the lighting of this video because it's like, should I have the blinds up or down? We just don't know what's going to be
because
happening here.
it's bright out there outside right now, but in half an hour it could be it could be raining. We're definitely gonna figure out how you made that big transition because it is a big transition. But do you remember subjects in school that were really like, was writing an early on thing? Did tell us kind of how you got into that.
Okay, well, I guess I can start by saying that my mother is an English professor. So I,
Okay.
from an early age, was read to, and both of my parents read a lot. And so I think reading was always a huge part of my life. And I mean, it could be genetics, it could be, or it could be that, but I always found English very, very easy in school. It was like,
Okay.
I didn't need to put any effort in versus math. Oh my goodness, that was a different story. So I think, we did the standardized tests in school, and English was always like 99th percentile, whatever, not that it means anything, but and then math would be like, oh, you're the 70th percentile or whatever. And that was me like agonizing over every answer. I enjoyed it because I think I was just naturally good at it and it didn't take too much extra effort. And then I would say I've always also been interested in, I guess, the arts or more creative subjects or the humanities. And so I think that's why I was drawn more to writing as a career. But I do also kind of like the element of strategy and logic that comes with being a marketing person. So it's not like I'm a full-blown creative. I have a bit of a balance.
All right. Did you do sports in school?
Oh, no. I was the PE person who was just there to get it over with. Yeah, I did do a little bit of dance as a child. I did some dance, but that's the extent of my...
That's the creative side. Dance is creative. So yeah.
Nothing competitive. I don't want to be competing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. And after you finished high school, what did you do?
So I went to university in England. So that is how I ended up over here. Yeah.
Right.
So I decided that, well, I guess to step back, I decided that I wanted to study communications.
That was actually the question I wanted to get at is what did you study?
Yeah.
And when do you remember thinking, do you remember a point when you're like, yep, this is what I'm going to do. I want to do communications.
It's a good question. I was very academic in high school. I got really competitive. Well, not competitive. I wouldn't say competitive, but I got very interested in doing well in high school.
Okay.
Because I was really interested in, I wouldn't say it was so much what college I went to in the sense of like the how good of a college it was, but I wanted to be able to go where I wanted to go. I wanted to have the option to go elsewhere. And so I was very motivated to give myself as many options as I could. And so I leaned into all the subjects just to get, the degree that would allow me to do that. And so my high school offered an international baccalaureate degree, which a lot of high schools do not offer. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a high school diploma that you can use internationally, which basically means that you can use your high school credits to apply to universities abroad.
Okay.
And it's kind of a unusual thing to do. I don't actually know how many people do it, but I had a really big graduating class, like thousands of high schoolers graduating at the same time, but only a very, very small fraction of us actually got that specific degree. And that allowed me to apply for universities abroad, which weirdly, I was the only one from my high school of my year that did that. So
yeah,
that was why I did it.
I want to touch on that because I heard you say a couple things. One thing I heard you say was I wanted to go where I could do what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And but you were talking about communication. So it sounded like, and you helped me figure this out because I heard you say, I want to do communications. I wanted to do well in school so that I could go where I wanted to go. And then you kind of you said something about, it sounded like I want to get the fuck out of here.
A combination of, it wasn't, I don't dislike where I grew up at all, but I knew that it wasn't necessarily a perfect fit for me. I knew that I could go elsewhere and have great experiences in different places. And so I used academia as a catalyst for being able to do that, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And that's what I was trying to figure out. Was this wow, I can go anywhere in the world. If I do well in school, I can go somewhere else. But I want to ask, when you said you didn't think maybe Orange County was the right, I don't know, fit. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but why? Help me understand what maybe was behind your desire to go.
There are so many different things that I could say. I would say that a lot of people in Orange County tend to stay in Orange County, or they don't leave very often. It's not, as you know, in the US, you're not close to that many other countries. And I felt like I wanted to live somewhere that was more diverse and gave me more opportunities to experience different cultures.
Okay.
And
got it.
that living in Europe has allowed me to do that very easily.
Yeah.
Much more easily.
I get that completely. And I appreciate you working through that with me, because if you said I grew up in Des Moines, Iowa, and I did well in school because I wanted the opportunity to go somewhere else, I probably wouldn't have even asked that question. And that's not knocking Des Moines. I grew up in northern Wyoming. I grew up in a very small town in northern Wyoming. Trust me, there were a lot of people that stayed, but there were a lot more people that probably graduation, high school came and they're like, I want to go. I want to go where there's more stuff happening. And then maybe later they might move back because they miss the mountains and the nature and all that stuff. But so I wanted to ask that about Orange County, because I think, wow, there's all kinds of stuff there. I kind of see why people might stick around. It's not probably the right fit for me. So where I'm going with this is I actually heard the international part was pretty important.
Yeah, I think initially I thought, I'll go to the East Coast, because that feels like a completely different
Feels
place.
international.
It's a different, the two coasts in the US are so different from each other. So that was my initial, I think I applied to universities in Massachusetts, where I have some family. In New Orleans, I remember thinking, that'll be so different. And it is. It's a completely different culture. So I kind of, Pennsylvania, I think I applied. And then I got the idea basically because my mom is British and I have dual citizenship. And so that was kind of a little bit of I wonder what I could do with that. And so that's what triggered the decision. Maybe I should look in England. And at the time, England was in the EU. So having a British passport basically meant having a European passport, which, right. Ka-ching. So that's kind of how that happened.
That makes sense. I'm happy
I should have started with that.
That's why we have this conversation. We pull these things out. All right. So now we need to back up a little bit.
Yes.
And go into, because if your mom was British and she showed up in California, and I think I'd like to just dig a little bit more into your family and how that might have had an influence, because obviously it did. So what can you share with us about kind of how your parents came together and what influence that might have had on you?
Honestly say that's probably one of the most fundamental things that has triggered where I am today, because
we almost missed it. Oh my goodness. All right.
I really should have gone. When you asked me about when I was 12, I should have said, what about before I was born? Because that might have been more relevant.
Well, I was looking for a clue, and then finally we found it. So now we can go back to where we should have started. So tell us more about that.
My mom she taught English as a second language. And so she grew up in England, in Yorkshire. And when she was in her 20s, moved to Morocco to teach English as a second language, and absolutely loved it. Meanwhile, my father, who's from Massachusetts, also really wanted to travel, but his avenue for traveling was going into the military. So my dad was in the military. Yep. He was a Marine, and he took on a program, an Arabic speaking program, where he was required to live in Morocco to do that program. And that's how they met. And they got married in England, and then they ended up moving back to the US. And then my older siblings were lucky because they got to travel around, and my sister was born in Hawaii, and they lived in Morocco for a bit, et cetera, et cetera. I was number 3, and by the time I came around, I was born in North Carolina, and then
because your father was still in the military.
Say again?
Yeah, and your father was still in the military. That's why the moving around, Hawaii.
Correct. So they basically went around where he was stationed. But my earliest memories are of being in Orange County. So by the time I was growing up, that was where my family had settled. But yeah, that was kind of the air that I breathed growing up, was just this love of being abroad. And it's funny because we didn't really do family vacations particularly. Like, it wasn't like, oh, we're going to go spend a week in Cabo or anything like that. But we did every few years go back to England and visit family. And my parents eventually separated, and my dad actually was stationed in Japan. So when I was 10, I went to Japan for a month and stayed with him. And so I guess my travel is living in places, or at least trying to experience places as if you live in them, not necessarily going and being on a beach somewhere.
So we just went from a young woman that grew up in the suburbs of Los Angeles and Orange County, living the idyllic life in California, moving to the UK. And now there's so much more context to this.
Yeah. I'm from
thank
a
you.
family of travelers.
And so let's chat about, so your siblings were older, you mentioned that. How much, like, were they old enough that they remembered some of their travels, like living in Morocco and these other places?
They do. I mean, they were really little, but they remember snippets. So I mean, they were kind of lucky, because I believe when they were in Morocco, they would have been maybe, I don't know, I think my brother was a baby, but my sister would have been maybe 3 or 4 years old, something like that. But she was in, preschool and stuff, picking up the language, French and Arabic, and, interacting. And it's just, I think, a really interesting way to immerse your child. But the funny thing is, my sister is actually, out of all of us, she's the homebody. She really likes to be home. She lives in California. And me and my brother are the ones that really love traveling and living abroad. So.
Did they both, when you were younger, do you remember them saying things like, I'm from Morocco, or I was born in Morocco? Because sometimes kids, like my son, he was born in Vermont. We lived in Vermont till he was 8. And he's been living in Arizona for 10, 11 years. And he's still very proud to tell people, I'm from Vermont.
I love that.
It's part of his identity. He was there a little bit longer than it sounds like your siblings were. But I was just curious, did your siblings like, well, I'm special because I was born in Morocco and you were just born here in California? Or was there any jealousy around that?
It's a good question. I don't remember them doing that. I think that they remember a little bit more of being on the East Coast. So maybe like Virginia and North Carolina a little bit more. But I am jealous. I have to say I'm a little bit bitter that they got to have, even though they don't really remember much of it. But I
heard you say they were lucky.
Yeah,
I did hear you say that earlier.
And that's actually what prompted the question. If I asked my parents to do something for me, I would be like, just couldn't you have stayed there, and then I could have been trilingual, and it would have been great.
That makes sense. But you went to Japan at 10.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
To spend time with your dad. What was that like? I guess the first question is, had you been out of the country already? Because you mentioned that you used to go to England every once in a while.
Yep.
But was this trip to Japan your first trip out of the country? And Japan's quite a bit different than the UK, so I'm curious about that.
It was my first trip to Asia, and it is to this day still my only trip to Asia.
Okay.
And I would like to change that, because when I was 10 and I went to Japan, I remember getting culture shock really badly. And I think when you're 10, you don't really know how to process those feelings in the same way. So I remember thinking, I really didn't like the food. I was a picky eater. I'm not anymore. I really didn't like the food. And it was just, overwhelming to not be able to speak the language. And yeah, there are a lot of things that now I think about, oh, if I went as an adult, I would absolutely love every single piece of this.
Do you remember have you had conversations about that with your dad? Do you remember there being tension or conflict between the two of you? And the reason I'm asking is because I took my son to Asia. He was probably 15. We spent a couple months in Malaysia, Thailand, and a short stay in Japan. And honestly, I think it was kind of the same thing. It was like he lost interest in the food pretty quickly. I remember we had a big fight. We were on Penang Island in Malaysia, and he just wanted to go to McDonald's. And I'm like, no, this is like the food capital of the world. Like, this is like, there's so many amazing choices. And I just want to go to McDonald's. And it was like this big fight that we had. And
yep.
Yeah. So I'm curious, Was your dad frustrated with that? Do you remember a tension between the two of you?
I do remember the first thing we ate when we arrived was we went to a Sizzler, which I think is hilarious. I don't know why there was a Sizzler in Tokyo, and I'm not sure if there still is. But anyway, that's like, and I remember being like, okay, this is fine. I mean, the menu's still a little weird, but I can deal with this.
Yeah.
But then there were other times where it was eating things. I ate horse when I was there. I'm a vegetarian now, but at the time, so there's a lot of, I feel like, very immersive experiences that I was maybe not fully prepared for. But I'm so grateful that I had that experience. I mean, how amazing. And to be there for a month.
Wow.
I also I always joke with my family about this now because my dad had us climb it was me and my brother that went, and he had us climb Mount Fuji, and
cool.
We had no prior training or experience to be doing that.
You came from California, sea level.
Yeah,
hot,
just, just one day it was, we're going to climb this mountain today. And I'm pretty sure he would, if you asked him, he would probably say that was not fun for him because he was like basically dragging us up that mountain, like, come on. But I would argue that, it was never meant to be. And funny enough, when we got to, so there's these stations as you go up the mountain, and we got to the second to last station before we reached the top. And I remember him saying, okay, you've got a choice now. We're almost there. You can either wait here and I'll go up to the top, or you can just come up with me. It's one more stop and we're there. And I said, you go. I'll wait
Really?
here. So I never made it to the very tippy top of Mount Fuji.
Okay. Do you regret that?
Don't, because I feel like everyone has different things that they care about. And for me, climbing to the top of a mountain is just not something that I care about. And so, there's other things. I, for example, really miss, there's a very big guinea pig culture and capybara culture in Japan. And those would be the kinds of things that I would really like to go see. So I'm very big on finding the things that you're interested in and doing those things, not necessarily doing the things that you should do. I should climb Mount Fuji.
I respect that. Yeah, I get that. Do you remember what you did while he was trekking to the top? Did you have a book in your backpack that you were reading, or what were you doing?
I just sat there, as they would say in England, as my mom would say, I think I just sat there with a face like a slapped ass. I think I just was miserable and wasn't being very good company to anybody. So yeah, I wasn't there alone. I was there with my stepsister and my stepmom, and so they sat with me, and then my brother and my dad went to the top.
Your brother went. Did your brother give you a hard time? Yeah, I'm sure.
No, you know what? He's a very good brother. So he was always the brother that if a plate of food was put in front of me and I really didn't want to eat it, but I knew I had to eat it, he would sneakily eat it for me so that I wouldn't have to.
Have you realized since then that maybe he had an ulterior motive? Maybe he was happy to eat your food, but wanted you to think he was doing you a favor? Yeah, I've done that.
I hope so, because otherwise it's really sad, because I feel like he was always just trying to kind of protect me from things.
I can't tell you how many times I've eaten somebody else's plate of food and said, oh, okay, I'll help you. And then I was like, very happy.
Yeah, leave it to me.
I'm a nice guy like that. So, all right, that's pretty cool. When you got back, so you were 10. Okay, around 10 is kind of when, in my experience, you'd come back to school at the end of the summer. This was over summer break, I assume.
I think it was, yeah.
Yep. So you come back to school after summer break, and there's a lot of like, well, what did you do this summer? Well, what did you do this summer? The teacher might even make you share with the class at that age what you did this summer. Do you remember any of that? Was there any conversation? Do you remember any reactions from other people?
I do remember feeling a little bit different because I knew, my mom was an immigrant, and then my dad became an immigrant when he moved to Japan, and I was kind of aware that my family's situation was a little bit different from, and again, maybe this is why I feel slightly out of place in Orange County, in the sense that I think other people maybe were just going on like a quote unquote normal summer vacation, and I was spending a month in Japan on a marine base, and then, taking trips to go climb Mount Fuji. So yeah, I think I was aware. And again, when we went to England too, we weren't going to London and going up the London Eye and, seeing Big Ben. We were driving up to this small village in Yorkshire that no one's ever heard of. And it's a little bit of a different experience. So I think I was conscious of that.
That's true. You'd already had been exposed to that. Do you remember, were you excited before the trip to Japan? Did you think, wow, this is really cool? And maybe it's just, I want to see dad. I get that too. But I'm curious, like, were you excited to go? And then afterwards, when you got back, was because you said there was some culture shock. You said there was some stuff you
Yeah.
didn't enjoy so much. So I'm just kind of curious.
Was excited, but I remember, keep in mind this was the day, these were the days before kids had like iPads and blah blah blah.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
remember dreading those long flights to England. I don't know how my mother did it with three young kids when she would take us.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember kind of dreading the flight, and this was also before, flights, we didn't have our own little TVs or anything, so I can't remember what we did. I think we must have read or did activities or whatever you do.
What was it? Just you and your brother on the flight? Because you said, yeah, it was just
Yep.
you and your brother.
Just
Okay.
us two. Yeah, so again, he kind of had to be the big brother there and just kind of take the lead with that. He's 3 years older
Gosh.
than me, but yeah, I know.
Yeah, my brother and I went from Syracuse, New York to Sydney, Australia when I was
Wow.
12. And it was just the two of us on that unaccompanied minor thing. So I can relate.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
it
yeah,
was
that's exactly
really,
it.
really boring because, there were no televisions. I think they used to have those like earphones. This was before your time, but they used to have the earphones that were like, you could plug them into the seat, but it was like an air cushion thing. It wasn't even wired. It was just so you could hear music maybe.
Okay.
But yeah, that was yeah, okay.
It's
Did
funny,
you
isn't
did
it?
you and your brother get along on the way? You said he was older, so he was a little bit more
In
responsible,
my
but
memory, yeah, I think
Yeah,
we did.
yeah.
I think we were
Okay.
fine, but it must have been a burden for him because he was the one that kind of had to take charge, I think, and be the responsible one as the
At
older
13.
brother. And I was just
Yeah.
kind of going along with it. So I'm a very laid back person, and that could be why, because I'm just like, okay, I guess I'm going to Japan for a month. I don't think I really thought too much about it. And to be
Right.
honest, I'm still a little bit like that when it comes to traveling, or I'm very go with the flow, like, oh, I know someone in Rome, I'll just go see them, and what do they want to do? I'll just do what they want to do. I'm very like, you guys take the lead and I will follow. So I'm not super fixated on logistics or anything like that.
what's that I love that about you, just kind of the flexibility. Even the first time we spoke, you're like, yeah, it's spontaneous, great. Because I told you, I
Yeah.
said, there's no script. I don't have a list of questions for you. You're like, okay, cool, let's go.
Even better.
So now we go back to when you graduated from high school and you got accepted to go to school over in the UK. Because that was a question I would normally ask is, well, what did your parents think of that? But your dad was traveling around. I don't know if he was still in Japan or where he was, but your mom had immigrated, so obvious. So, but I'm still going to ask you, what was that like leaving California to go to the UK?
So I can't remember if my dad was back at that point, but he did make his way back to California. So they're both in California now, and my stepmom is in California. They were really excited. I think they just understood why I wanted to do it, and I feel so grateful because I think I'm really lucky to have parents that were just like, you go, just go. But I guess the other side to that is they're also like, you figure it out. Like, if that's what you want to do, great, but we're not going to take you. So that was the first time I'd gotten on a flight on my own, and it was, okay, you're flying to England, and good luck. Like, see you later. And in a way, I think it was good in the sense that there was no option of like, Mom, I want to come home now. I've made a big mistake. It was like, no, you've committed to this now. You're in the UK, and that's that. So I'm grateful for that style of parenting because I think I just had to make it work. So, and I
Okay.
did.
So let's say, I don't want to put it, well, I'll just ask you, was there a point after you got there that you did regret your decision? Did you go through the homesickness thing? I think most people do. I've been through it. I've been traveling for a while now, and I've been through it.
Yes. So I don't remember this very clearly, but my mom reminds me of this. I think the first week that I arrived, I arrived and, you go into student accommodation, but because I was an international student, they advised that you come a week earlier than everybody else. So I arrived and I wasn't put in my permanent residence. I was put in some random residence. I don't know why. So I was staying in this empty dorm building. It was like no one else. I think there might have been one other person in like a different part of the building or whatever. So I'm just, I'm 18 years old. I've never lived abroad, and suddenly I'm alone in this, and it was kind of a creepy. It was almost like, imagine like being in Hogwarts or something. That was like what the vibe
Really?
was in this particular student accommodation. So I remember, well, my mom remembers me calling her. And again, this was before, we didn't have smartphones and stuff, but somehow I think I managed to connect my laptop into a landline or whatever and found a way to call her. And she says that I was like, what am I doing here? This is really weird and scary. But as soon as I moved into the permanent residences, that was when all of the students came in, and then it was fine.
Why do you, like in hindsight, if you look back, have you ever figured out why they suggested you come a week early, or is that still a mystery? Because it sounds like
I think that they
if it
have
was,
some kind of I
yeah,
think
if
they
it was
have
like,
orientation for international students. I don't remember, but I think that they wanted you to go set up a bank account and you had to kind of do all those little
okay,
things that international students have to do. So I think that was why, just to give you a little bit more time to acclimatize. But I'm not sure why they put me in an empty building. I don't know
well,
why they couldn't have put us all together. I've never figured that out. Yeah, it was.
that's the part I'm wondering. If you took all of the international students, they all show up a week early and they all get to know each other and they have, dinner
Yeah,
together and maybe go to the bank together, then it would be that would be a softer landing, I guess is what I would say.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah,
but being alone, like right off the bat, that's never a good way to start something, in my
yeah.
opinion. But yeah, okay.
Once I was kind of everyone moved in, I was absolutely fine. I loved it. I was like flying. I thought it was amazing. And to this day, I've lived abroad for 16 years now. I don't have moments of homesickness, but I do find that saying goodbye when I travel back and forth, when I say goodbye, that gets harder every single time.
Yeah,
I'm not sure
yeah, it
why,
does.
but it's really difficult. And I do sometimes kick myself in the sense that I feel like I've made my life more difficult. Sometimes I think, why couldn't you have just stayed in California? You'd have been near your family. Everything would have been so much easier. But I've kind of set myself up in this immigrant life that is, it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do, but it has obviously its appeal.
Let's discuss that. Some of the things are obvious because you mentioned, well, family's a long ways away. That's an obvious one. But there's some other things that are maybe not so obvious. So I've been traveling for 4.5 years, full time, and oftentimes people are like, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing! That's so cool! That must be wonderful." And I'm not saying it's not, but there's also some things that surprised me when I started doing it.
Mm,
And there are the other side. One is just being physically, long distance from family. But I'd love to dig into some of your other kind of moments that you stop and have those like, what am I doing here? What.
yeah,
So what should people that have never experienced what you're doing or what I'm doing, what would you like them to understand about the reality of being an
yeah.
expat anywhere?
Well, first and foremost, I would love to talk to you more about being a digital nomad because I think that would be so difficult. And I'll explain why. Because I feel like at least me as an immigrant in England, I've been able to kind of settle and carve out a second home, if that makes sense. So I do still have that feeling of rootedness, even though I did also live in Spain for a bit. So, it has changed, but I have this sense of having two homes. And so I think that has helped me feel secure. But there is this constant feeling of being kind of pulled in two different directions, which is really difficult. And you never feel like you fully belong in one place. So I never feel like I fully belong here or back at home because I'm a different person now. I mean, I'd love to know if you think I ever sound British when I speak, actually, because sometimes people pick up a little twang of the English. But when I'm home, I sound very, very, very American. So it's
Right.
things like that I guess I've become a hybrid, and it's a interesting balance of, where do I belong?
Let me ask you a hypothetical question, because I don't know how you'd know the answer to this question, but I'm curious what you would think. If you had gone to school in Pennsylvania and decided, wow, I really like Pennsylvania, and you decided to stay in Pennsylvania, how would you guess how you, like, because you just described, I feel like I'm kind of in between. I
Yeah.
don't necessarily belong here. I don't necessarily belong there. There's this in between thing. And I'm wondering if you just moved to Pennsylvania, if you would have felt kind of the same, because it's still far
Yeah.
away.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're still not going to go there for the weekend, but culturally,
It's different.
there's still
And
a
it's
difference
far.
between
I mean,
culturally
it's
and,
still a 5-hour
yeah,
flight. Yeah.
yeah,
I think that that's right. I think I would still feel, I think no matter what, I was going to do this to myself. I think it was just something that I had, that I was going to go somewhere else and live in a different place. And the difference, I would say, is that because I've lived in a different country since the age of 18, I would feel really weird moving back to the US as an adult, because I've never actually been an adult living permanently in the US, and I feel like I wouldn't really, it would be like being an expat again. Yeah, I would have to figure out, how the heck does healthcare work in the US? Oh my goodness. These are the kinds of things that it's strange to say this, but it's like I would feel like a foreigner in my own country. And so and sometimes now when I speak to other Americans, they make references about certain things and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So it's this strange thing where it's like I'm not fully British, I'm not fully American, I'm just swimming in both waters.
I get that. And I suspect that that's, if somebody listening to this has not had that experience, it's maybe kind of hard to imagine, but I completely get it. And you've been outside the US, living outside the US a lot longer than I have. And I'm already like that, 4.5 years. And when I go home to visit, I just feel like kind of uncomfortable in my own skin. It's not that I don't like it there. It's just that, and of course, every time I go back, the food prices are, it seems like they double. And maybe it's the same thing in the UK, but just things, and I get back and I just kind of feel like I'm kind of already out of touch. And then when I spend a lot of time in Colombia, it feels kind of like my home probably more than any other place, but I leave and go other places, visit other places. So for me, every time come back to Colombia, I feel like, oh, I'm home. I feel like I understand how things work here. I can connect with people, communicate with people, and move through my daily life. And it just feels much more normal than it does even when I go to the US. So it's interesting how maybe the place we were born or the place we grew up isn't like the natural fit for our personalities, or there's an energy thing, right? And there's probably research around that, but it's just like, I feel like I'm more Colombian than I am. We would say American, but if you say American to Colombians, they're like, no, we're all Americans. We're all on the American continent.
Yeah, U.S. American.
I've become very sensitive to not using the word American, even though it makes it easier because most of the world understands exactly what you're saying when you say that.
Yeah.
But which actually reminds me, because in English, we don't have another word for American. We could say I'm from the United States or a United States citizen or whatever. But in the Spanish language, they have a specific word for somebody from the U.S. And I'm afraid to even try and say it, but it's something like estadounidense or something like that.
Interesting.
Yeah, so they have a word. So it's very easy for them. They would say you're Colombian, you're Mexican, you're French, you're German, you're estadounidense or whatever. So it makes sense for them. They've got a word for that. So when they hear Americans, people from the U.S. say, oh, I'm American, they're like, geez, you Americans. It's an interesting language thing. So the reason I'm bringing that up is you were interested in English. That was a strong suit for you, but you also had a family that traveled. You mentioned, your sister, I believe had learned some words when she was in Morocco. Have you studied other languages? Was that part of your thing? Is that something you're really into as well? Because I think you mentioned that you lived in Spain as well, right?
So I did French growing up. So from the age of 12, I learned French in school. So 12 to 18, but I didn't have a knack for it. I think part of the reason is because the US education system doesn't really do an amazing job of teaching languages, or at least not in the sense of being able to use them in a natural way. So my French is not good. And then and I guess you could also add, I grew up in Southern California, which is full of Spanish speakers. And I, for whatever reason, decided to learn French, which I don't regret, but I think back on it and I think, oops. But when I moved to Spain, I did not speak Spanish, and that was quite an adjustment. And it was a little bit of a baptism by fire, and it was a good thing because I learned the basics very well. Like, I can order food at a restaurant and I can get groceries, all the things that you have to do, I can do that. No problem. I wouldn't bat an eyelid.
Yes.
But having meaningful conversations is much more difficult for me. I don't think I have a knack for languages. But I'm grateful that I did have that experience. And then my partner here in London is British and Turkish. And so now I've been trying to speak, I've been trying to learn a little bit of Turkish, and that's much more difficult actually. So now I'm like, oh gosh, I wish I'd have just, really applied myself with Spanish. That probably would have been much easier, but
But yeah, and I'll tell you, I kind of similar story that before I started traveling full time, I was living in Arizona. I lived in Arizona for, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years. Plenty of opportunities to learn Spanish, to practice Spanish. Did I? No, of course not. And then when I got to Colombia the first, 4.5 years ago, and I thought maybe I'd stick around in Latin America for a while, it became obvious. Probably time to start learning.
Yeah. And how did
You
it
know,
go?
it was so much easier, and it just came because I had to. That's the difference. Like I'm kind of on the extrovert side, and I want to talk to people. I want to connect with people.
So
And
perfect.
I
Yeah.
quickly learned that the only way I'm going to really be able to do that is start learning.
It takes a lot
And
of
it was,
confidence. Yeah, because
yeah.
it can be very humbling to be muddling through a foreign language.
And another thing I learned pretty quickly was, you know what? We're all like that. So me in Colombia or Mexico trying to have a conversation, because there's plenty of people in the Latin world that speak some English. Not everybody.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna over exaggerate this. It's not easy to find people that do. But what I've learned, and I think is common, is if I'm trying in Spanish and they've got a little bit, maybe their English is about as good as my Spanish. If they
Yeah.
hear me trying, they are much more likely to open up and try as well.
Yeah.
Where if I just showed up and just expected to find people that could speak some English, I think the vast majority of them would just look at me and say, nope, no habla inglés,
Yeah.
and it would be done. But since I'm trying, they would try. It's the same thing. It's kind of when I was young and I visited France, I think when I was 15, and I'd had 3 years of French in school. But like you said, I realized, okay, like in school,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I'm one of the top students. I know this French thing, and you go to
Yeah.
Paris, and yeah, it's a
It's
totally different animal. But just the fact that I was willing to try and speak in French, the stereotypical Parisian who doesn't have any time for somebody from the US, at least it would soften them up a little bit. They'd at least, start to try and communicate. So I think there's value in that. Let's go back because I want to make sure we don't miss any. We've already covered a lot of great stuff, but I want to make sure we don't miss any other huge things that we just gloss over. So you went to school, you were majoring in communication right from the
Yeah.
beginning, is that right? And did you stick with
Correct.
communication all the way through?
Yeah, and something that was great about the education system in England, and one of the appeals for me coming here, is that when you study in a university, you just study that subject. So I wasn't taking any
Okay.
other, you don't have to take math and science and all these other, subjects. So I loved that. So I only did communications, and I was able to, here you graduate in 3 years rather than 4 years as well. So in 3 years, I got my bachelor's degree. And then I had one additional year where I got my master's degree. So
Okay.
in 4 years, I was able to get 2 degrees, which is, and truly a fraction of the price of what it would have been in the US. So really, even that in and of itself made it a fantastic decision for me.
I hear all the pros. The pros sound amazing. And what are the cons? Was there any downside to the way that I was going to say you did that, but I guess it's just the way they do it there. Was there a downside to that? Do you feel like you missed out on
Interesting
anything?
question. One thing I did notice is, I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but I guess just stepping back a little bit and talking about American culture. So whether it's academic or work culture, Americans hustle, and they really, you really have to fight to get to where you want to be. And I think that there's a lot of pressure to be quote unquote successful. And I think in high school, I managed to use that to my advantage in the sense that I was ambitious, and it got me over to England. And then I got to England, and suddenly that culture kind of disappeared. And there
Really?
were a lot of people that they were they're really smart people, and they'd clearly worked hard in school, but it was almost like, la 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 la, like here I am at university, I'm kind of here to have fun. And whereas my friends in the US were like really, it was rigorous. And so I did feel a little bit like I lost a little bit of that, like being pushed to
Okay.
strive for more. Luckily, I didn't really need to be pushed because I was so grateful to be there, and I was so interested in the subject anyway that I engaged. But I knew a lot of people that wouldn't show up to lectures, wouldn't show up to seminars, and I
And they
think
still
part of
got
that
through.
as well is, yeah, I think part of it is also because it's so much cheaper that maybe they didn't feel as much of a, like, I really need to
Pressure.
take advantage
Yeah.
of this.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting one. But other than that, I thought the quality of the education was amazing. My professors were amazing. University of Leeds is amazing. Shout out to Leeds. So yeah, in that sense, it was a great experience. And as I said, I feel lucky I got to have 2 degrees.
As far as, because you mentioned the things you didn't have to do, you didn't have to study math or biology or all those 101 courses that most people in the US end up taking a bunch of classes that I guess you could say maybe they don't need or it doesn't contribute directly to their degree. But I also, when I was in school, well, here's the thing. I imagine if I'm doing communications, and pretty much every class I do is communications related, which means presumably all the other students are also communications majors.
Right.
You're hanging out with a bunch of communications people and you don't have the opportunity to maybe be exposed to the people that are doing computer science or math or engineering. And I wonder, I guess that's, I just wonder if you kind of miss out on not being exposed to maybe some of those. Well, here's an example. If I'm a computer science major and I'm only going to class with a bunch of computer scientists, I've spent 4 or 5 years at university to get my master's degree. And I never once hung out with anybody that was there for theater or music or English or anything like that.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on as somebody who went through a program like you did? Is there any relevance to that? Would you advise anybody
It's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah, I've never looked at it that way. I think that there were some degrees that were really like that, where it was very insular and people really stuck with each other. And in a way, I think in having that network is a good thing. My degree wasn't so much like that. It was very kind of, there was lots of different disciplines within communications. So there were the people that were... Yeah, there were people that were doing cinema. There were people that were doing radio. I remember new media social media was coming about. So that was like the new degree and it was kind of, that's weird.
Yeah.
So in that sense, and I also think the professors did a really good job of making it multidisciplinary, and we did pull in from other disciplines. But my we call them student halls. My student halls were very diverse, and so the people that I actually ended up being friends with and am still friends with today are from they did all sorts of different degrees. So I think I did get exposed to the different degrees, yeah.
Okay, I appreciate that response because I think of like if I'm having a conversation with my son or a daughter or maybe a grandchild someday, it is like I see one of the benefits of going to university as engaging with a bunch of different people from a bunch of different backgrounds. And if my kid was going into accounting, I would encourage them to, maybe take some, music classes or dance classes or whatever. But that just kind of naturally happens in our typical university structure here. So I was just wondering if that was something. Okay. So from the time you started as a communications major until you finished with your master's degree in communications, did you still love it the same? Did you love it less? Did you love it more? Were you still as enthusiastic by the time you graduated?
I still loved it. I loved it more. I was really interested in media. I found media fascinating and just the way that we communicate, but I didn't know exactly how I was going to apply that in my career. But again, I knew I was good at writing, so it was kind of like, okay, this is the thing that I can do really well. And to be honest, I think early in my career, I rested on my laurels a little bit with that because it was like, oh yeah, I can write. Like, yeah, I can do anything, no problem. And to an extent, that's the case. I can basically write till the cows come home, but obviously over the years I've developed my craft, and there's actually now I've learned because I guess that's another thing. My degree wasn't super practical in the sense that I wasn't learning like these are the principles of marketing, for example. So then I can't remember how, but I decided I was going to get into marketing because that seemed to make the most sense for what I was good at and what I was interested in. And so when I was applying for jobs, that was what I looked into. And I looked into travel businesses because of course I at that point had developed my passion for travel. So that's how I started my career, was at a travel business.
Okay. So tell me, well, before you tell me about working in that travel business, let's talk about marketing a little bit, because I see where marketing connects. It seems like it would make sense, but I've also remember hearing from, and I've worked in kind of the marketing space for a while as well. And I came across this concept that marketing is an awful lot of analytics and a lot of just kind of spreadsheets and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it seems almost contradictory sometimes to maybe somebody that wants to share a story and write things and get to the bottom of emotions and all this stuff. And then maybe you get a marketing job and somebody sits you in front of a spreadsheet and you're analyzing, Google paid ads results and tweaking and all these different things. Did you even end up doing any of that stuff? Or what would you like somebody to know about the realities of working in marketing when you're passionate about writing and storytelling? Because it's not always the same thing, I think.
For sure. There are marketing people that are super, I guess, for example, performance marketing people who go into, the analytics and the numbers versus the brand people, for example, that are much more into the creative. But digital marketing overall, it all overlaps, and you need to be able to pull from all of those things. So I would say that was the muscle I had to build, was the analytical side of things. And I'm grateful that I did have, and again, if I was speaking to, let's say an 18-year-old that was interested in getting into marketing, I would definitely say, go into broad marketing roles so you can figure out what you actually want to do. For example, I got the idea in my head I wanted to do PR, and I did an internship in PR and quickly realized that you have to be quite extroverted to do PR. And I thought, oh no, this is not what I want to do at all.
Okay.
So I basically tried out a lot of different things, and I had several roles that were broad, which I'm glad for, because they pushed me and challenged me in ways that I had to learn the full scope of marketing. And then now later on in my career, when I realized, okay, no, the writing side of things is definitely where I want to be, I've been able to specialize down that route. But it's always informed by all the other stuff. It's just that's not what I lean into anymore.
I think when I actually, around the time I started this podcast, I kind of thought, I'll do digital marketing stuff. And that was great until people said, can you do SEO, analytics and paid ads and all this stuff? And I realized, I really don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Can I just build a website for you that looks pretty, or, maybe even, some email automations, or, and I realized maybe digital marketing is not really my thing.
And there's so many, even for example, I've done quite a lot of social media marketing, which I don't do as much anymore, but it's so interesting the way people perceive it, because everyone thinks they can do social media, or everyone thinks it's an easy job. Yeah. My goodness, is there a lot involved in doing social media marketing? So I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah. All right. So you got hired by a travel company. So was that your first job out of school?
That was my first job, and that was why I moved to Spain. So my first job at a travel company in Spain. So that was how that happened. And
were they operating in Spanish? Just tell me. I don't want to jump the gun, but tell me about that. What was that like?
So when I graduated and I was applying for jobs, I had it, again, it was just in my head, okay, I'm in the EU, I'm going to get a job in the EU. I'm going to find a job, any English speaking job, but I didn't want to be a teacher. So, okay, any English speaking marketing job in the EU. And so I was applying to all these different jobs, and I actually got accepted into a job at it was to write blog content for a tuna industry company in the Netherlands, in a place called Tilburg, which I decided, I was like, I did say I would go anywhere, but then I looked into it and I was like, I just don't think that is going to be the right fit for me. So I declined that.
What was the biggest part of the decision? The geography involved, or the writing about canned tuna?
It was a combination. I think more the writing about tuna.
What would you write about? You got to be creative. Well, you're creative. I'm sure you could find something.
The industry, the industry at whole. And, it tracks to where I am now, because I do prefer doing B2C marketing versus B2B. But I think also I looked into, and, how we were talking about earlier about certain places just resonate with you more. And I looked into where that was going to be, and kind of, how I would be able to get around, et cetera, et cetera. And I just thought, it just doesn't feel like a good fit. So anyway, I'm really glad that I didn't do that, because that was when I found I got offered this job in Seville, Spain, which I'd never been. I didn't know anything about it, and it was for a luxury camping company. So basically, it was like the Airbnb of luxury camping, and they needed a copywriter. And this was at the, this was when SEO was first really becoming a big thing, and
Right.
so that was how I started my career, was doing SEO copywriting, which was great. And obviously it gave me the opportunity to move there. So it literally was, I landed and I found an apartment, and I started at this job, but it was all English speaking. So even though the founder of the company was from Spain, and he did a business degree in the US, and I can't remember the details, but I think Spain paid for him to go do that degree, but the requirement on his scholarship was that he had to come and start his business back in Spain. So that's
he
how
started a
that
business, an English-based business, but it was in Spain.
in Spain.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so a lot of English and American people worked there, or English-speaking Spanish people worked there.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah. So one thing you mentioned that I guess it just, I don't know, popped in my head. You said with the copywriting with the SEO, that was a big thing. And then I remember I had tried to kind of write some of my own stuff, for some websites and businesses I'd had in the past, and it was trying to write with SEO in mind.
Yeah.
Didn't always feel very natural. So I'm curious, I'm sure it's natural to you, but do you have a strong preference for if somebody said, I just want you to write stuff that's really good, or I want you to write stuff that's going to help us with our SEO?
Yeah.
Do you have a different physical, emotional reaction to either of those two job offers?
Yeah. I'm a big believer that you can keep the integrity of your brand and the voice of your brand, and still apply the principles of content marketing and digital marketing. There should be a balance. If you just write something that you only want it to be like super high quality in your brand voice, but you're not going to optimize it for the internet at all. I mean, yes, you can send it to people, or you can share it and people will see it, and it is a great reflection of your brand. But what is the purpose of that piece of content? Because if the purpose is to
get read,
get read, get traffic,
convey a message,
then it's what's the point of doing that? So I think you have to have a balance of those two things. I would say the principles of content marketing apply whether we're talking about SEO or now in the age of AI. It's that you need to make sure that you are writing for humans first and foremost. If it's not interesting to humans, there's no point in writing it. But you can also do so in a way where, okay, what are humans searching for at the moment? If they're searching for this certain keyword, that means they're interested in that. So how can I write this piece of...
Yeah. It sounds like the difference between, if you go back to before, like right now we see stuff and we recognize, oh, that's AI. But before that, when the blogs and the websites, go back a little ways, I think we all had seen pages that were just
Keyword
stuffed with
stuffing.
keywords.
Yeah.
That it was like, my gosh, this is horrible, da 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 da. But that's just bad writing, I think, right?
It's a similar conversation. Yeah, it's a similar conversation. Because you don't
And
want to sacrifice quality for doing those things, but you have to do it in a smart way, don't you? You have to be strategic about it.
Because if we read it and it's just full of keywords and it's just horribly written and it's repeating the same stuff and you're just like, wow, this is really bad. You might, if you're not a writer, you don't work in marketing, you might think, wow, this SEO, whatever this SEO optimized writing stuff is horrible. Why I would hate to have to do that as a job. But then when you see a blog post, you Google something, you see a blog post and you're like, oh, this is really helpful. And you stick around on it. The point is you don't know that it was SEO'd. It's not obvious that it was written for SEO, but it's also very good for SEO. Exactly. So you can have good writing that's also gets in front of people because it's well optimized, right? It's just my
and adding value. I think as long as that piece of content adds value to the reader, then they'll forgive you for putting a few keywords in there because they know that you've written that for them and it makes sense to them and they've gained something from it. Well, otherwise, they'll resent you because they clicked on it and then you've wasted their time.
If it's a whole article full of keywords that you get to the end of it and you're like, wow, I just wasted 5 minutes or 10 minutes or however long it is, that's a little different than you recognize I see this keyword a few times, but this is a really helpful article and I'm getting something out of it. That's right, so,
and it goes down to what are your KPIs? What do you see as success? Because if you just want traffic, fine, you can get that traffic, but then is that meaningful traffic? Is it going to do anything? So you really have to balance the two things.
And and that comes into, what's the marketing company or the writer that wrote the stuff are they going to their client and saying, look, I got you all this traffic? Or is it, I'm getting you conversions, I'm getting email signups, I'm getting follows, or whatever, all
Loyal
that
brand,
type of stuff. But
advocates that are gonna come back to you.
Right. So what was the biggest takeaway you got from your job in Spain?
You know what? I think
like personally, probably. We could talk about business, but I mean, personally, I'm just curious.
Oh, I guess in my job in Spain, that it gave me confidence. I think it gave me confidence that like, oh, I can make a career in this, and obviously moving abroad gives you confidence. So the fact that I was able to build a life in Spain, I lived there for almost 2 years. So it was my first job, my first time living somewhere where they don't speak English. I think both of those things gave me a lot of confidence. And then I got to a point where I felt like I'd outgrown the job. And I also, living in southern Spain is a very relaxed lifestyle. It's an amazing lifestyle, but I was in my early 20s, and I kind of felt like, okay, I think I need to pick up the pace a little bit. So that's when I moved to London, and I certainly picked up the pace. But it was a really formative experience for me living there.
Very cool. It's interesting because you mentioned that when you went to school in the UK, people were just more laid back, relaxed. I'm here to have fun. Thing. And then you said you went to Spain, where it sounds like it was even more laid back and relaxed. And okay, so just kind of walk me through from when you left Spain, you went back to London, to kind of where you are now, and what you're excited about, or what got you most excited during that process of transitioning to where you are now.
Yeah, it was really exciting. It was the first time that I lived in a really big city, and I got a job as the marketing manager at a really iconic restaurant in London. It's called the Oxo Tower Restaurant, and it's got this beautiful terrace with a view of St. Paul's and the River Thames, and it's just, I don't know how I managed to get that. It's funny actually, because sometimes as someone who writes and travel, you think, who gives me the right to write about these places? But it was my first time where I was like, oh, you know what, I can do this. I'm not a Londoner yet, but I can really visualize what it is that makes this place so special, why it's a landmark restaurant here, and I'm gonna bring that to life. So that was my first job when I moved to London. And since then, I've had 2 other jobs in London full-time that were both, again, all different industries. So I did move around. I wasn't always in travel. But all of the companies that I've worked for since then have been very London rooted. And a lot of the work that I'm doing for them, or did for them, was about showing that London character in their marketing. So that's been really fun.
Do you think that you had an advantage as being someone, from the US with the accent? Do you think that was an advantage, or did it make it more difficult for you overall?
I think it was an advantage. I think that people perceive Americans as confident, as driven. I think, there are people that kind of sneer at Americans in Europe, and that's fine, whatever. But I think overall, I think that Americans carry themselves, this is a generalization, but carry themselves with confidence.
Be careful.
Yeah, carry themselves with confidence. Yes, we're loud sometimes, I know, but we get things done. We solve problems, and we have, I would say, a good attitude. Again, I know this isn't always the case, but anyway, I think that is how I was perceived in some instances, and I think I'm clearly not. I'm not an American who's just going to come in and bulldoze over, because I think there's that stereotype, kind of going back to what you were saying about how Americans just call themselves Americans, and it's it's so arrogant, right? But that's just how it is. So I don't know. I don't know if you've ever seen Emily in Paris, but she kind of just comes in. You should watch it actually, because it's quite amusing, and it's this American that she comes in and she's driven and she's got charisma, et cetera, but she just isn't. She doesn't understand French culture, and so it's really jarring. And so I don't think that I did that in London. I think I entered the scene with humility, and I think that has gotten me far. There might be people out there that disagree. I don't know. They can leave that in the comments.
Because I can imagine, you apply for a job with this restaurant that you mentioned, this iconic restaurant in London, and the board sitting around trying to decide whether they want to offer you a job. There's someone that... Yeah. How can we hire an American to
Yeah.
come write about this iconic London restaurant. It just doesn't make sense. And then someone else on the board might say, you know what, this is great because we want, maybe because tourism is important. Maybe we want to
Yep.
appeal to the US market. I remember when I, was spending quite a bit of time in Colombia, I had a client that hired me to do some stuff, and he said, geez, Jason, we should have you go around and do, create videos of the different destinations that we work with in Colombia. And you can kind of, because you look like our typical
Yeah.
client,
Yeah, exactly.
instead of hiring somebody in Colombia to walk around and say how great Colombia is, I hire,
Yes.
somebody that looks like the typical client to walk around and talk about how great Colombia is. It makes a difference. So that's why I guess what was behind the question is if it helped you with the travel writing, because presumably so many of your clients are super interested in the US market. I'm just guessing.
Definitely. And I would also say, so now that I've lived in, because I was obviously fresh to London at that point, now I've lived in London for 10 years. And something I love now is when friends or other people come and visit London and they're telling me they're noticing things and, oh, did you hear about this restaurant? And I had a friend here the other weekend that was, oh, this restaurant has the best sticky toffee pudding. And so it's like having people highlight those things that actually are really exciting about a place, I think is a benefit to having somebody. And then another thing I would say is that London is such a diverse city. It is so incredibly diverse that I also imagine that they were probably just like, oh, it's just like another foreign person. So
That's true. And I think most of us have had the experience where they visit a place and like me, I've been traveling full time 4.5 years, quite a few places. And I show up and I'm like, oh my gosh, the metro is so cool, or the metro cables, or the buses, or the street food. And then I meet people that have lived in there. I'm also single, so I do date on occasion, and I'll meet somebody. And in my mind, I'm thinking, you know what we should do? We should go get on the metro. We're going to go to the metro cable, take the metro cable up into the mountains, and then we're going to eat empanadas on top of the mountain. To me, that sounds amazing. I'm like, wow, what a good date. And they're like, Jason, are you kidding me?
like, you want to do what?
I never get a second date because they're like, I do that every day. That's, we just have different perspectives. There's no right or wrong. I get that. If somebody was visiting me in the US and wanted to go to McDonald's every day, I'd probably like, okay, I'll go. I'm always happy to share things, but it's So,
and I think as well, it is being in the travel industry, there's just so many things that you have to navigate. And it's that awareness that I don't necessarily know best, but I have a curiosity about these places and I hope that I can open them up to other people. But it's a whole minefield. I mean, I'm very aware of it.
Yeah, you touched on the key there, I think, is the curiosity. Because if you hire, I'm in Bogota. If I hire a great guide in Bogota, you know what? He'd probably take me on the metro, take me up the metro cable and eat empanadas. And he would just be enthusiastic about it. And he's like, oh, I've got this really cool place that, we can, go get whatever. But it's just a reflection of that openness and that curiosity. And very importantly, the desire to share. Because that's the part, because empanadas can be really boring if you're just talking about empanadas. If you're talking about sharing empanadas on the street and with a story behind it and all this stuff, it's a totally different thing, which is what we're talking about is, that storytelling and authentic connection. So, all right. So you worked for a few different brands and now you're, I don't want to say you're doing your own thing, but I mean that in a very positive way. You're doing your own thing.
Yeah.
Right. So let's discuss a little bit how you transitioned into that and kind of what that's like.
So I decided after, working full time with companies, I guess there were two things that fostered this decision. One was that I wanted more flexibility to be able to go back and forth to the US. And obviously when you're in a full-time job, that's more difficult.
That's a challenge, yeah.
And to travel in general, because I really enjoy slow travel, and when you're just trying to travel on the weekend or on limited vacation days, it's very difficult to do that. So I wanted to live more of that lifestyle. And then the second thing was that I wanted to be more specialized in copywriting, and I wanted to go back into the travel industry. And I thought, okay, well, I can get both of those things. I can really focus in on copywriting and develop my craft and my experience doing that, and I'll have the flexibility of freelancing. So I decided to go freelance over 2 years ago now, and it's been amazing, but it is a whirlwind for sure. I mean, you really have to gosh, I did it because I wanted to just do copywriting. And it's like, oh, I have to be a whole business owner. And there's sales and there's so many things that I've had to navigate. But I've learned so much from doing so, and it's been amazing. And I've been able to be more selective about the types of companies that I work with, which is great. And it's really helped me get in touch with the type of work that I like to be doing, the type of clients that I like to work with. So it's been a really fantastic experience, but it's not been easy.
Did you just jump right into it? Like, okay, you quit your job and started your own thing, or did you transition?
I sure
How
did.
did you do it? You did.
I sure did.
Would you do it? Would you do it that same way? Again?
No, probably not. I really wanted to go all in, and I was like, I'm ready. I'm going to do it. And I went all in. There's pros and cons to doing that. I would say to anyone thinking of doing it, make sure you have a big buffer to tide you over, because there's going to be ups and downs, and it's very difficult to keep, you're just so used to having a steady income, and then suddenly you're super busy one month and then you're quiet the next. And especially in travel too, there's peaks and troughs. And at the moment, the economy is not great, and certainly a lot of people are not traveling at the moment for various different reasons. So there's ups and downs. But in a way, I do kind of, again, it's like that sink or swim thing, where it's like I was like, I'm just gonna go all in and I'm gonna make it work. And if it fails, at least I know that I really, really gave it a shot. But there's something to be said about maybe like dipping your toes in and kind of gradually getting into it as well.
Yeah, and it's always easy to look back and say, well, like maybe I should have done it a slightly different way. But I'm also concerned that so many people have this dream. They're like, I really want to do my own thing, but I'm afraid to do it. So I'll start it on the side. But then sometimes it's really hard to get things going when you're starting them on the side. It's just, I guess it just depends on the person and what it is. I definitely kind of just jumped in myself, but I appreciate it's hard to get used to the ups and downs. And it's like, if every couple of weeks you're going through an existential crisis because you've got $3.43 left in your bank account, and you're hoping that client who said, I'll pay you by the end of the week actually comes through. And you get to Friday and you don't get the notice yet. And you're like, it's stressful.
And it's like, am I really doing, maybe I shouldn't be doing website copywriting. Maybe I should have gone all in with the social media captions. And there's so many ways that you can position yourself in the market. So again, it's interesting as a brand person and as a copywriter, because I do have to remind myself, okay, wait a second, sit back and think about how you're positioning yourself, because that's important too. And in fact, I had to do that before our call, because I was like, how exactly should I position myself? Because it's a minefield. There's just so many avenues you can go down. So again, I really sympathize with anyone that started a business. It's not easy.
It's not, but at the same time, what I've noticed is when I'm doing, I guess what I would call a job, like just kind of straight, like maybe I'm doing some work for a client that's not super exciting.
Yeah.
And not if my clients are listening, I appreciate the opportunity. And it's so when I contrast how I feel doing that work to how I feel when I'm, working on my own website or working on my own business or, creating connections with people, having conversations with people like yourself, it's like, I love it. And it's like, man, if I wasn't an entrepreneur, if I wasn't self-employed, if I was just doing the boring work for someone else all the time, I wouldn't wake up at, on Sunday morning at 7 a.m. with this idea in my head, and I run and pull out my laptop, and I end up spending all Sunday sitting in front of my laptop and, creating something that gets me excited. And I'm not going to do that for a client. I love my clients, but.
Yeah, it's so true. It's funny, isn't it? It's like, it's so difficult, but then you care about it so much. And the things that you get to do, the opportunities that you get are amazing. And if you do really lean into the networking side of things, because I used to be repulsed by the idea of networking. And now that I've leaned into it, oh my gosh, it's wonderful. You get to connect like us, where it's like, oh, it's someone that has really interesting views and similar values to me, and I can learn from them, and you can be picky about who you connect with. It's great.
That's what I love about the podcast. It's like a university education for me. Every week I have a conversation with somebody who is aligned in purpose and interests, but has different perspectives. And I love it. We're going to turn this podcast into a university for someday, and people can sign up and take classes from folks like yourself. So, all right. So is there we've discussed a bunch of things. We've been going for quite a while, and I appreciate you
I've
sharing so
thrown the
much time
kitchen
with
sink at
me.
you, I feel like.
Yeah, well, but I'm sure we missed something. We almost missed the whole fact that your parents met in Morocco and the influence that had on you. So I don't want to miss anything else. But let me ask you this, Hayley. What did I forget to ask you? What do you wish I had asked you? Or what else do you want to share with our listeners before we wrap up?
Yes, I wouldn't. I think we've touched on everything about my life. I mean, obviously, there's many other things
Not
I'm sure I
everything.
could speak about, but I would say, in terms of, because I'm aware that there's a lot of travel businesses that listen to your podcast, and I would like to say to them, if you are a purposeful business and the work that you're doing out in the world is with integrity and meaning, don't let your online presence be mismatched with that, because it will show. People will see that and think, why are they doing this great work, but then they've got this really shallow blog that's just stuffed with keywords or is clearly written with AI, or they send out these generic emails. And I think what ends up happening, and again, I really sympathize, we're in this, I've spent over a decade now in the digital marketing world, and I've seen how increasingly there's this pressure to generate more content and do it quicker, and it's like everyone's fighting to be visible. And I think we can all agree that we don't need any more noise. Like, there's enough noise out there. And I would just say to those businesses, don't worry about keeping up with the Joneses, because if you have this, like, if you don't have the resources to do all of those content channels justice, you're going to do your emails and your website and your blog and your social channels and etc. If you try to do it all, you're not going to do them well. And so I would say streamline that, go for depth, step back and really think about your brand and your tone of voice, who you're talking to and how you want to position yourself to those people, and connect with them on an emotional level and build a community of long-term, high quality people that you actually want to be your customers.
Mm-hmm.
You can do that by taking a quality versus quantity approach. So I would just, because I speak to so many people that work for small businesses, and I just want to reassure them that you really don't need to be killing yourself to be out there and super, super, super visible. The right people will resonate if you create an online presence that adds value and show your own unique expertise, insights, experiences, because all people in travel have them, and show that, and you'll be fine.
I love that you said that. I think you're right. I mean, we started this conversation with what brand voice strategist is the voice. What I hear you saying is let them hear your voice, whether that means on a podcast or a YouTube channel or in your website copy or whatever. And the other thing that came up, I'm just curious what you think. I was actually thinking, if you can listen to, like, go back through I don't want to say the archives, go through the group of amazing experts that I've brought together here in this community. And if you can listen to someone's episode and then go look at their website and their marketing, and is there a connection? Is what you see on their website, does it sound like what you heard when they were speaking with Jason?
Yeah.
And if those two things do not align, then maybe there's an opportunity to have somebody like yourself come in and work with them to help create that alignment. Because when they do something like this, have a conversation with me, I believe that, out of everybody I've spoken with, we've really got to their voice, just like we did with yours today. And to take that and compare that to, okay, so what's your website look like? Because I know. Yeah. I've had conversations with people. I'm like, oh my God, that was the most fascinating conversation. We discussed all these things, and I know what their website looks like. I've seen them all. And I go look at their website. I'm like, they don't even have an about section. They don't have a picture of anybody. Like, I can't tell what they do.
Yeah.
And there's that disconnect. So I'm happy you brought that up.
It sounds cheesy, but I really want, I personally, and this is the reason I got into this type of work, is because I personally want to make travel better. I think we can all travel better. I think the world would benefit if we all traveled better, whatever that means to you. I have my own opinions on what that means. Mm-hmm. And I want to help the company, because there are companies out there really doing that and really making, changing things. But they're not being heard, and they're not sharing their stories, and it's a shame. And so that's why I want to help them. I want to help The companies that are making travel better, and sometimes it is just a few little tweaks, and then they're there. So that's what I wanted to say. I wanted to say, don't feel bad if you're not doing that, because I know how difficult it is as a business owner myself to do all of that. And it might just be that you need to bring in an expert that can just kind of tweak a few things or get your positioning there or whatever. But I know that these companies do have the integrity, so it should be reflected in what they're doing online.
There are so many amazing people in this space. You know, just the ones I've had a conversation with is just a narrow slice of the pie. Yeah. There are so many, and that's why I love doing this. When I started this podcast, I didn't know if I'd make it past episode 10. But I was like, wait, I've had 10 amazing people. Let's find 10 more, and and it just keeps going, because there are so many amazing people. But sometimes you don't realize how connected they are, how passionate they are, until you sit down and have a conversation with them. It's that thing, you know, you've got a tour operator that the first time his clients ever connect with him him or her on a personal level is maybe they lead a group trip. They take a group trip to, I don't know, Turkey or something, and they're sitting at a hotel or lodge with their clients that came with them on this trip, and they start the questions. How did you get into this? What were you doing before this? Where were your parents from? How do your parents meet? All those questions that we've just been discussing. Yeah. Many times that's the first time that those clients have really had that connection with the person that they booked their trip through. Yeah. So if we can get that connection started beforehand, you're going to have more clients. You're going to be able to change more lives. You're going to be able to expose people to cool stuff. So, yes. Yeah.
You're speaking my language. Exactly. Yeah, you nailed it.
Well, that's why we're having this conversation, is because we're aligned. We've got that same energy and passion for it. So, Hayley, this has been so much fun. I know we chatted for quite a while. I appreciate. I don't know if the sun is going down there yet. Your room looks a little darker,
actually,
so maybe
British summertime. We're good.
Maybe it's raining. I don't know. But anyway, what a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much. And I look forward to finding some projects to collaborate with you on the future. So thank you, Hayley. Appreciate
great.
it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you asking such interesting questions, and I loved our conversation. So yeah, hope to do it again.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Hayley. You have a great day.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
I trust you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. If you're enjoying the Big World Made Small podcast, please take a moment to tell the algorithm by subscribing and posting a review so that others can benefit as well. I also invite you to take a quick trip over to bigworldmadesmall.com and join our private adventure travel community to receive new episode notifications, special access to our guest experts, and perhaps even some exclusive partner offers that we haven't discussed on the podcast. I'll publish another episode soon. Until then, keep exploring. It's the best way to make a big world feel just a bit smaller.